What do you think the most obvious reason is that youth baseball players love to go to their baseball games? Aside from being part of a team and spending time with teammates, they love to play the game. That's the most eventful part. They love to get out on the field and be involved in competition against another team and be part of a winning effort. With that in mind, can you think of the most uneventful part? Being on the bench. Unless players are super tired and they need a rest, no player likes to be on the bench while the action is out on the field. Even though the bench can seem like the most boring part of a game, there are ways that coaches can make the bench an eventful place for players. In today's Bullpen Bulletin, I'm giving coaches my 4 tips on the best ways to keep the bench engaged during a game. This video is specifically focused on when your team is on defense out on the field. Hey team, Coach Hart here with Building Better Baseball, the best place for baseball education. If this is your first video and we're meeting for the first time, I come out with a new Bullpen Bulletin every week that will help any youth player or coach take their game to the next level. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you can learn something new about baseball every week. If you're a coach watching this and you're looking for some help organizing your practices and you want to make the most of the limited time that you have with your players, I made a free 2-hour practice plan that will really help you out. It's complete with 2 practice blueprints and covers everything you need to improve your practices. Be sure you grab it in the description below. For all players watching this who are in need of some new equipment, but they don't really know how to find the best fit, I made a free equipment guide that covers all types of baseball equipment that will really help you out. It explains everything you need to know about finding the perfect fit. Be sure to grab it in the description below. Now, let's learn how to make the bench experience just as eventful as the game. My first tip is to assign your bench players jobs during the game. If you've ever played baseball or really any sport, you know that there's not much a player can do when they're sitting on the bench watching their team out on the field. Unless it's a big game like a tournament or a championship game, a heavy feeling of boredom hits every bench player that's uncontrollable. When boredom sets in, that's when off-task behavior begins, and that's the last thing a coach needs. When I was coaching, one thing I did that I thought was very successful in keeping the bench engaged was assigning bench jobs. These jobs were simple responsibilities that the bench players could complete that took their mind off of boredom and put it on a task to complete. Having these responsibilities made each inning go by much quicker for the players, and it allowed me to focus on the defense on the field. One job was the scorekeeper job. And before you think it, no, I did not make a 10-year-old keep the scorebook for us. The scorekeeper job was for a bench player to ask our scorekeeper where every opposing batter hit the ball. The scorekeeper would tell the player, and the player would come to the fence and tell the defense where the ball went last time. If the scorekeeper said that he hit it to right field, the player would yell out to the right fielder, "Hey Johnny, ball came to you last time." This was a great job and it kept the bench players engaged every game. Another job we had was getting foul balls. The player's job was to try and get every foul ball they could before the other team could get it. It was almost like a race against the opposing team's bench players and the fans going after the ball. We had a few other specific jobs, but if there were any players left over, their jobs were to be the hype men. This job was easy because all you had to do was cheer for your team. Cheer as loud as you could. The one requirement was that if someone made a mistake in the field, the hype men would focus their cheering on picking that person up and telling them to get the next one. The bench players loved all of these jobs and really stayed engaged in the game because they had a job to do. My second tip is to make the dugout a no-phone zone. Even though this tip seems obvious, I'm always surprised at how many youth games I go to where the bench players are on their phones during the games. To me, this is completely unacceptable. I think the best decision a coach can make is declaring the dugout a no-phone zone. The baseball field is no place for phones. Players are there for a reason, and that's to have fun playing baseball when they're out on the field and to cheer for their team when they're on the bench. They can be on their phone at any other time in their life, but during the 3 hours of a baseball game and the 2 hours of a practice, they can survive without having their phone. As a society, we have become so attached to our phones that it seems like they're almost glued to our hands. I grew up in the 90s when cell phones were just starting to rise in popularity, so luckily that was never really a problem when I played youth baseball. But in today's world, youth baseball players were born into a world that's run by technology, so it's understandable why they're so attached to their screens. Youth baseball should be something different. Somewhere young people can go to detach from what's normal and be a part of a team and experience social camaraderie with their teammates without the help of a device. If players use phones in the dugout during their games and practices, youth baseball is just more of the same, and players will lump their youth baseball experience in with everything else. Coaches should want to make their players' baseball experience stand out and be the shining light among everything else. If coaches make the dugout a no-phone zone, players will be more engaged and have more fun with their team, creating memories that will last a lifetime. My third tip is to always explain mistakes that happen in the field to your bench players. There are very few baseball games that have zero mistakes. Even at the professional level, you'd be lucky to witness a perfect game or a no-hitter. In youth baseball, you'd be lucky to have a game without an error. These errors are all teaching moments where coaches can teach players what they did wrong and how they can improve and learn from their mistakes. More often than not, there is a definitive reason that some players are on the bench more than others. Simply put, that reason is because the players in the field are more talented than the players on the bench. Even though all youth players need to learn as much as they can, the players on the bench could probably use a little bit more teaching. Having them on the bench is a perfect teaching opportunity. As a coach, take advantage of mistakes in the field and use them to help your bench players learn more about the game. Be sure to explain and break down every mistake in the field to your bench players and make sure they understand what happened. This will help them learn more about the game and they will be more prepared when they're out on the field. If the pitcher didn't cover first on a right side ground ball or he didn't back up third base like he was supposed to, go to the bench and ask them what happened. Then ask them what was supposed to happen. If they know, then great. If they don't, be sure to explain to them what happened and what was supposed to happen. This will give them more confidence and raise their baseball IQ when they're out on the field. My fourth tip today is to have your bench players call out every situation. One last thing I'll cover is something players can do from the bench that will help raise their baseball IQ and keep their minds sharp and focused throughout the game. When I coached, I always had my bench players call out the situation and where the play was supposed to go. They were supposed to yell it out to the fielders and make sure everyone could hear. If there was one out and a runner on first, they would yell, "One out, runner on first, play's going to second, turn 2. They would do this for every new situation. If there was a new situation and I didn't hear the bench call out the situation, I would turn to them and say, "Hey bench, where are we going with the ball?" This process does two things. First, it keeps the bench players engaged and involved with what's happening in the game. One thing that really gets to me is when a bench player has no idea what's happened in the game because they're not paying attention. What's the point of coming to the game if you don't watch it? Second, it helps the defense on the field remember the situation. All baseball players at some point have a moment when they forget how many outs there are or where the play is supposed to go. It's part of the game. Having the bench call out every new situation with how many outs there are and where the play is supposed to go will keep the defense sharp and ready to make the play. If you're a coach watching this, leave a comment below and let me know if any of these tips are new to you and which ones you're excited to use in your next game. I'd love to hear what you think. And don't forget to grab your free 2-hour practice plan and free equipment guide in the description below. We all know that being on the bench and not in the action of the game is hard to do. It can get boring sometimes, but as a coach, you can cure this boredom by assigning your players jobs, making the bench a no-phone zone, always explaining mistakes that happen, and having them call out every new situation to the fielders. Thanks for spending some time with me today. I hope this video gave all coaches some new ideas for how to make the bench a more engaging and enjoyable time for players. I'll see you next week for another installment of the Bullpen Bulletin.